So, remember back when I did archetype analysis? I do. Unfortunately. Yeah, safe to say I'm not the most proud of those videos looking back at them now. In terms of editing, dedication to a large project, and passion at the time, they were definitely accomplishments, but the actual quality leaves much to be desired. I mean, look at it. It's BTech Archetype Archive. I forgot cards from the archetype several times, the commentary is dead, and my opinions are from a Yu-Gi-Oh player who only started actually getting good at the game in 2018, which is when the majority of these videos came out. That's not enough experience to analyze anything. You can tell that the thinking like this eventually got to my head a bit. I mean, it's been literal years since the last one. I moved into a new house since the last one. I graduated high school and a college course since the last one. I got a PS5 since the last one. However, a promise is a promise. It's been too long, and it's about time I followed through. Thank you for your support. Thank you for sticking with me for all this time. I hope I can live up to your expectations. I've had this script basically finished for the last year and a half, and it's about time I paid up my old debts. Who knows, maybe this can actually top the Galaxy review, seeing as that one is probably the only archetype analysis I actually remain proud of. I just hope it isn't 40 minutes. With the Wi-Fi I have access to, I'll be dead before that thing manages to render and process. As you may have predicted, the star of this review will be Red Dragon Archfiend, the star monster, and the synchro archetype of Jack Atlas. Or, if you want to get technical, the Synchro Monster and Star Archetype of Jack Atlas, if you happen to be more familiar with the dub. As one of the most iconic Synchro Monsters ever created, being one of the first, RDA has a pretty extensive list of support, branching out in quite a few different directions, and it's honestly always been a source of fascination for me. It may not be Blue Eyes or Stardust, but it is full of big dragons with varied effects and overwhelming power, and as a Seto Kaiba fanboy, that falls right into my line of interest. Moving quickly into the review section of the video, Red Dragon Archfiend is the centerpiece of the archetype. It's a generic level 8 synchro, a dark dragon with 3000 attack, 2500 defense, and the following effect. After damage calculation, if this card attacks a defense position monster your opponent controls, destroy all defense position monsters your opponent controls. During your end phase, destroy all other monsters you control that did not declare an attack this turn. This card must be face up on the field in order to activate and to resolve this effect. Back in the day, I praised this nuke effect a bit. Nowadays, I'm a bit more critical, thank you Rada. While this effect is brilliant if you want to finish off an opponent on the defensive and you have other monsters to go in there and get the kill, if you don't, or if your opponent's not on their last legs, the effect really falls flat. The fact that it nukes any monsters of yours that you didn't attack with is just extra annoying. I understand that it's thematic. Oh, we're all in boys, if you're not with me, you're against me. But was this big of a downside really necessary? It nukes any support you had, as well as any defensive walls. I don't know, the card has not aged well in my eyes, in my opinion. And you'll see what they do to rectify that later on in the archetype. Right, so we just got done with Red Dragon Archfiend, now we move on to the other versions and direct support, right? Wrong, we have an entire other archetype to cover real quick. That's right, I'm serving you up a 2-for-1 deal today. When I come back to a series, I make sure it's worth your time. Remember how galaxies and photons are basically connected but also two separate archetypes? Well, Red Dragon Archfiend has a similar deal with this little tuner archetype called Resonator that Jack Atlas used in the anime. See, where galaxies can technically work without photons, just not very well, Red Dragon Archfiend can't do anything without a tuner archetype. I mean, it's a synchro monster. You can't have your synchros without your tuners, it's the way it is. And seeing as Jack used Resonators, they're now entwined with RDA. They're not explicitly calibrated to each other over all of the monsters, but the most recent Resonator support makes it clear. These two are buddy-buddy, you're supposed to use them together. You build a dedicated deck, you get the rewards. In order to properly preface why Red Dragon Archfiend is good, we're going to need to cover the Resonators. However, there's about 15 cards in that archetype. That's almost as much as Red Dragon Archfiend itself. Because I'm not about to make another 43-minute Galaxy-type archetype analysis, we're gonna speedrun this review. I'll give my basic thoughts on the card, whether I think it's good or not, and if it's really worth talking about, I'll go into a little bit more detail. You ready? Right, let's do this. Double Resonator provides some gimmicky utility, but there are so many better effects in the Resonator archetype that it's basically irrelevant. I ignore this one. Mirror Resonator has fine abilities that can provide versatility, serving as free material from the hand or graveyard if your opponent has an extra deck monster on the field, which, let's face it, it's modern Yu-Gi-Oh! They almost certainly will. It's also a level 1, and those are very appreciated in this archetype for reasons you'll see later. It's an optional choice. I personally don't go with it, but feel free to. Synchro Resonator is one of the best Resonators, special summoning itself from the hand if you already control a Synchro Monster, and letting you easily go into higher levels of RDA, which I'll get into later. It even lets you recycle a Resonator monster from your graveyard when you Synchro Summon or Link Summon with it, which is very nice versatility, depending on the one that you choose and the ones you have available. I recommend 3, this one is definitely worth stacking up on, and it's even a 1-for-1 target, what's not to love? Chain Resonator isn't as good as I thought it was, but it's still a decent option in the right situations. Essentially, if you normal summon him while you've already got RDA on the field, you can go into any but one of the evolved Red Dragon Archfiend forms. Which is obviously a good effect, but the fact that he has to specifically be normal summoned makes him a bit slow and situational. He already needs to be in your hand while you have the Synchro Monster on the field, and you need that normal summon, otherwise it might be too late. However, he works as a one-off just fine, providing another name for your level 1 Resonator. Barrier Resonator is pretty bad by Resonator standards. The effect screams anime, but hey, if you use it with double Resonator, it's still bad. Force Resonator can turn one of your monsters into Armadis for one turn if you discard it, which isn't a bad effect on paper, but like, is it really worth it? No, and you'll see that when we get into the Synchros. Red Resonator is great, giving you a free Synchro if you have a level 4 or lower monster in your hand when you normal summon it, or if you special summon it, you can gain some life points back, up to 3,000 if you happen to have RDA on the field, which happens a lot more often than you'd think. This deck can recycle Resonators like nobody's business. Also, a potential free link too, my personal go-to being Nightmare Phoenix. As a side piece of trivia, it's also a rekindling target. Not really too relevant in this deck, but in something like Flame Bell, War of the Worthless really showed why rekindling is probably best off left at 1. Definitely run a lot of these. In my opinion, it's one of the 3 Resonators that you definitely want to max out on. The other one being Crimson Resonator, the newest Resonator, and it shows. This card is fantastic, but only if you use it right. If you use it in the correct situation, you can summon the most powerful card in the archetype in one turn on turn 1. Or at the very least, you'll have a couple of meat shields to protect you from attacks in the form of low-level Tuna Boys. Please don't Chaos Max me. It can even special summon itself from the hand if you control no monsters, making it even better. If you special summon this card while you have no monsters, then summon a level 4 monster, you can go into Red Rising Dragon, which we'll get into later, using those two, and then use Red Rising to special summon Crimson Boy back, then use its second effect to special summon 2 other Resonators from your hand or deck, then use all of those to go into the archetype's final boss monster. Boom! The most powerful monster in the archetype was just summoned using 2 cards on turn 1, and those cards are both searchable. Crimson Resonator is a love letter to this archetype. It's so fantastic. Definitely max out on it. However, be warned, Red Resonator is arguably the better option in general scenarios. Crimson Resonator can occasionally fall flat if you don't have the right setup. Flare Resonator is unfortunately a massive step down from the singing praise I was giving to Red and Crimson. All it gives you is 300 extra attack points to whatever monster you Synchro Summon with it. Is it possible to scream anime louder than that? Yes actually, but we'll get to that later. It's a level 3 tuner, and I guess 300 extra attack points, I'm not gonna say no, but they have better alternatives for level 3 tuners in the archetype. In my opinion, this one can definitely go by the wayside. Creation Resonator is just Synchron Resonator, but worse. You can only special summon it from your hand if you have a level 8 or higher Synchro monster. That being said, I said it's worse than Synchron Resonator, not a bad card. You should still run at least one, because 2 of the Red Dragon Archfiend boss monsters are level 12 and need 2 tuners, meaning that all you need is this one and the aforementioned Synchron Resonator, special summon them both from your hand. Boom, you're sorted with a very powerful boss monster. It's a good card, just outshined by its younger brother. Clock Resonator is weird, having once per turn destruction immunity if it's in face-up defense mode. I mean, that's fine. Doesn't really do anything unless you need a meat shield. It just is anime to me. Damn you, Jack, and your face-up defense mode summoning shenanigans! Dark Resonator is like Clock Resonator, but with more attack and an arguably worse effect. I prefer it over Clock Resonator because more attack, and its effect also works in attack mode, but both of these are outmatched by Creation Resonator so much because these two just sit on your field and take up space. Creation Resonator's out here advancing your plays like a tuner archetype should. I personally ignore all of these level 3 battle resistant Resonators. It's just a thing of the past. Red Sprinter is not a Resonator. Stay with me. It's a level 4 Fire Fiend that can let you summon a level 3 or lower Fiend type monster from your hand or graveyard if you summon it with no other monsters on your field. See, they could have just put the word Resonator in there and saved a couple of ink spots, but they didn't, and they're silly for it. Thankfully, this card is far from silly. You really want to open with this card as well as Red Resonator or Crimson Resonator. Note the combo I mentioned earlier. Or maybe open with all three, why not? Have some fun. Red Nova is a level 1 tuner that special summons itself if you control a level 8 or higher Dark Synchro Dragon, and lets you summon a Fiend from the deck if you use it to double tune after the monster has been summoned. Cool effect, I guess. I run 1, but why do you need that extra Fiend when you've already double tuned yourself a massive fuck off Synchro Dragon? I run 1, but it's ultimately unnecessary in my opinion. Red Familiar is also not a Resonator, but it provides a decent recovery option that can enable combos, seeing as it gives you an instant resurrection, and then you can immediately use the second effect that lets you manipulate the levels of the dragon you just brought back to suit your current setup. Personally, I have never used the second effect. I don't find myself getting there, but the first effect makes this card a one-off in my opinion. Red Warg is a level 6 Fire Fiend that you can special summon from the hand when you normal summon a Resonator, but its attack is halved. For 1, summon it in defense mode, it's got more points there anyways. For 2, run a couple of these things. This thing, plus Red Resonator, is a Red Dragon Archfiend straight away. Red Rising Dragon, as I mentioned him earlier, is the second Synchro Monster we're reviewing today, and it's a level 6 Dark Dragon. It lets you special summon a Resonator monster from the graveyard when it's Synchro summoned, which will hopefully be level 2, so you can immediately go into Red Dragon Archfiend. Or better yet, it'll be Crimson Resonator, so you can bring out the big boy that we'll get to a bit later. If this monster is in your graveyard, except the turn it was sent there, you can banish it to special summon 2 level 1 Resonators from the graveyard. I already mentioned the Hyper Wombo combo you can do with this thing earlier, but the alternative play before Crimson Resonator kicked down the front door was you summon this thing with Red Resonator and a level 4 probably Red Sprinter. Then you revive the Red Resonator to synchro summon Red Dragon Archfiend. If it lives until the next turn, you can banish this card from the graveyard to special summon 2 level 1 Resonators that you hopefully had there in the first place in order to summon Tyrant RDA, Hot RDA Bane, or Hot RDA Abyss. Boom, that's the opening combo. Really, the only downside to this card is that it locks you into Dark Dragon Synchro Monsters, which is a little annoying, seeing as otherwise this thing is an easy turn 1 Crystal Wing, which, realistically, is probably why they put on that limitation in the first place. But hey, we're playing Red Dragon Archfiend, we've got more than enough powerful options available as is. Definitely max out on this guy, it is so useful at kickstarting your entire play. Okay, spell and trap support for the Resonators. Why'd I do this to myself? Resonator Energy is a surprisingly good search card if you've already done a couple Synchro summons, especially with a good target in Sprinter or even Red Familiar if you need it, turning this into a potential comeback card. Resonator Call is an archetypal E-Call, run at least 2, you'd be dumb not to. Resonator Command was a little strange looking to me at first, but then I realized you could use it to get Crimson Resonator into the graveyard and Red Sprinter into your hand, which pops off the combo I mentioned earlier, which results in the big boy, so I recommend at least 2. Resonator Destruction is a gimmicky little card, feels like something from out of the old Synchro era. If you open with it in your hand alongside enough cards to make Red Rising Dragon, you're going to be getting at least 2 card pops in one turn, and you've still got a whole turn with it left on the field. Even though that's not exactly ideal, especially if you go first. I run 1 occasionally, it's not a necessary option, but hey, if you want to add some utility into your deck, why not? It's not exactly going to screw you over, unless it does, in which case I take no responsibility. Red Carpet is unfortunately too slow nowadays because it's a trap card, but if you can combo it with Red Familiar and a decent amount of graveyard setup, i.e. as a comeback after you got your field destroyed, you could potentially go from no monsters to Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity in one turn. I say potentially, because that is a once in a blue moon type of scenario. And with that, we made it. We've covered all the Resonators and all the other indirect Red Dragon Archfiend support I could find. Altogether, it's a solid synchro summoning toolbox. They don't exactly have the widest versatility, what with locking themselves into Dark Dragon Synchro Monsters, which isn't exactly the deepest pool of monsters imaginable, but they're not meant to be a wide synchro toolbox. They're meant to summon Red Dragon Archfiend and Red Dragon Archfiend equivalents, and they do that damn well. Quality over quantity. What's there to complain about? Just make big Jack Atlas monsters and everything will be okay. Oh my god, we're back at actual Red Dragon Archfiend monsters. That took longer than a grade A under A hiatus. Anyways, Red Gardener. Well, we're really not coming back with a bang, huh? It provides fine protection, though I've never actually used it, and I don't plan to. If you run 2 or 3, I can almost guarantee you it's going to end up as a dead draw. If you run 1, you'll barely draw it. What was the point? You can go without it, unless you really want more level 4 monsters, but there are so many better alternatives. This card falls by the wayside as yet another unnecessary member. Next up, we have Red Dragon Archfiend Assault Mode. Hey, Assault Mode! I was going to do a review on you. See, look, here's the file and everything. Anyways, this is an Assault Mode monster, so naturally, it's 2 levels higher than the original RDA, has 500 more attack and defense, and the following effect. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned with Assault Mode activate, and it special summons the original version of the monster from the graveyard upon its destruction, like all Assault Mode monsters. The unique effect is that, after damage calculation, if this card attacked, destroy all other monsters on the field. Well, that's pretty cool. I love total annihilation. This guy does it in a way that's more useful than the original Red Dragon Archfiend, seeing as he just nukes everything on the field. No defense position requirements, no compromise. It used to let you destroy all other monsters in existence, but that was understandably nerfed, not too healthy for the game. It's not really worth talking about in a dedicated Red Dragon Archfiend deck, seeing as they have better options that require a lot less work and a lot less outside support, but on its own it's a pretty sweet effect, and assault modes are more powerful than ever with their recent support, so he's a good boy. Right, about 7 years later, we've finally made it back to the Red Dragon Synchro Monsters. That was why this review took a while to come out. I didn't expect all of that to be required reading. This is worse than Ruby. The next monster is Hot Red Dragon Archfiend. Hot? I mean, he's not my type, but I'm sure certain dragon fanatics would disagree. This card is the manga version of RDA, and quite frankly, it's better than the original. It has the same stats, level, type, and attribute, but the effect is upped significantly. In your main phase 1, you can destroy all other attack position monsters on the field, and then Hot RDA is the only monster that can attack that turn. It still damages your own resources, but the effect is far more practical as a trade-off, letting you turn the tables on your opponent if they weren't on the defensive already. If they were, it has the same summoning conditions as the original, just break him out, but overall, Hot RDA is a much more reliable option, and I consider him an upgrade over the original. However, if you really want a good retrain of the original, you've got to go with Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend. It's better in nearly every way than the other two. It's modern, it's fresh, it jacks off right-handed, and has these effects. It gets treated as Red Dragon Archfiend in the graveyard or on the field, allowing for you to use the support cards with it, and it has the ability to destroy all special summon monsters on the field that have equal or less attack, not including itself, and then it inflicts 500 damage to your opponent for each one. This is easily my favourite standard Red Dragon Archfiend monster. I run 3, there's no reason to run the original with this thing existing. It has a better effect, a more practical effect, even a little bit of burn damage on the side. That's like several Abakis at once, what's not to love? And with that, we're done with the basic Red Dragon Archfiend and its upgrades and retrains. From here on out, we're talking about the main gimmick of Red Dragon Archfiend, the advanced forms. Take a Red Dragon Archfiend, or one non-tuner Dark Dragon Synchro Monster, add in a splash of Resonator, and you make more spicy dishes than the average episode of Food Wars. The first advanced form is Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. It's a level 9 Dark Dragon with 3200 attack, 2500 defense, requires 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner Dark Dragon Synchro Monster, and has this effect. Quick effect, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target one tuner in your graveyard, special summon it in defense position. You can only use each effect of Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss once per turn. This is a pretty sweet monster overall, and it should be as clear as day as to why. Obviously, it's that 200 attack point increase, baby! Remember when Ally of Justice Garrothog was banned from competitive play for 6 years? This guy gets it permanently, and they wonder why this game is dying. Printing this card, they may as well have chucked all their profits into the abyss. Power scaling? What? They must have gotten their inspiration from fairy tales. Being a bit less stupid about it, Quick Effect Negation is a great effect, seeing as it's not just limited to monsters, meaning this card can actually provide interruption options for this deck, which was something it was lacking up to this point. I mean, with all the sheer power, the archetype was kinda looking like a giant bicep. The negation also allows for the interruption of battle traps, so long as they're not spell speed 3, meaning that this guy is guaranteed to hit hard with a 3200 body. The second effect is also useful, if you can pull it off. You resummon the tuner monster you used to make Abyss, then tune it again to take this monster to the next level, which we'll get to shortly. I recommend running Abyss. It's a nice monster, all around good effects, it adds a nice little pinch of finesse to this archetype. That next level I was talking about looks like this. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Bane. It's level 10 with 3500 attack, requires the same requirements as Archfiend Abyss, and it has the following effect. You contribute one monster, then target one Red Dragon Archfiend monster in your graveyard, special summon it. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can special summon 2 tuners with the same level, one from your deck and one from your graveyard, in defense position. You can only use each effect of Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Bane once per turn. These are good effects. One of the optimal plays I see here is dealing battle damage, then in main phase 2, tributing one of those summoned tuners for RDA, then tuning that one into a higher form, probably Abyss. A good play, make no mistake. Having Abyss in your corner for your opponent's turn will never not be good. Another option would be to summon 2 level 1s, and then double tune them together, yes we'll get to that, into a boss monster that we'll also get to later, leaving you with an even more powerful monster for the opponent's turn. The only downside to this play is that it's only available in main phase 2 after you've already done battle, meaning that if you are hoping to ramp up your damage values with a new monster, or more monsters, that's not going to be an option, Chief, unless you happen to run urgent tuning. However, 3500 attack isn't exactly peanuts, so I think Bane will do just fine at laying the smackdown by itself. Plus, with how easy it is in this deck to swarm the field with Resonators, you'll probably get tribute fodder for Bane easily, and then you can go into the higher summons before you engage in the smackdown. Whatever the case, it's easily worth a spot in the extra deck. Briefly deviating away from the Hot Red Dragon lineup, we're going to talk about Tyrant Red Dragon Archfiend. This is the start of a rather unique trend for some Red Dragon Archfiend Synchro Monsters, the requirement for more than one tuner, which just casually, uproots the universal requirement for Synchro Monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Subverts my expectations better than The Last Jedi. Anyways, Tyrant has 3500 attack and requires 2 tuners plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters, which makes it generic to an extent, which is actually really useful, seeing as it doesn't already require a Synchro Monster as one of its materials. It also has the following effects. Must be Synchro summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. You can only use each of these effects of Tyrant Red Dragon Archfiend once per turn. During your main phase 1, you can destroy all other cards on the field. Also, for the rest of this turn, other monsters you control cannot attack. During either player's battle phase, when a spell/trap card is activated, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. And if you do that, this card gains 500 attack. Well, damn, that's how you make a double-tuned Synchro. First of all-inclusive field nuke at no cost, besides reduced damage output, and you already have 3500 attack. That's awesome! The second effect negates battle traps and disruptive quick play spells, meaning that if this card makes it to the battle phase, you better believe it's going to hit and hit hard. Also, it negates evenly matched. While this card isn't one I use very often, seeing as I often have the resources to go into the even higher synchros, I can definitely sing its praises as a great monster, and I recommend playing around with it if the opportunity presents itself to you. Stepping away from the norm for a while, we enter into the realm of the 5Ds anime. Behold, Majestic Red Dragon. Yeah, it needs a bit of beholding. This is quite the card. Like Majestic Star Dragon, it requires Majestic Dragon and 1 non-tuner monster, plus Red Dragon Archfiend. It has 4000 attack, 3500 defense, and these effects. Cannot be destroyed by card effects. After damage calculation, if this card attacks, destroy all defense position monsters on the field. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, and if you do, this card gains attack equal to that monster's attack. These changes last until the end of this turn. Wow, this thing is great! Protection, RDA's nuke effect with no downside, effect negation, and attack gain. Why is no one talking about this? This is amazing! Wait, there's a little bit more. During the end phase, target 1 Red Dragon Archfiend in your graveyard. Return this card from the field to the extra deck. Then special summon that target. Oh god damn it, they had to add that bit at the end, didn't they? This is the biggest weakness of the Majestic monsters. Fucking Neo Syndrome. However, you can at least summon the base form back from the graveyard, which can include Scarlight, so I can't call it a total loss. Realistically, the summoning condition is also a bit of a problem. You don't actually run any level 1 non-tuners, meaning you'll need to clog up your deck with non-archetypal monsters in order to make this thing possible. In addition, unless you really want to summon Link Karibo with it, Majestic Dragon is pretty useless outside of this one play. However, there was quite a bit of majestic support, see what I did there, in Dawn of Majesty, which includes a retrain of Majestic Dragon that is a whole lot better than the original. Arrive in Late can also help make your Majestic Red Dragon a little bit easier to summon by using it with Converging Will's Dragon, but sadly RDA doesn't get any of the benefits that Stardust does from the new support. Long story short, Majestic Red Dragon is far more usable now than ever before, with additional support I'll cover later in the archetype, and it is a fun card to use, make no mistake, it's quite the monster. But the Neo Syndrome, as well as the awkward summoning condition, makes it necessary to put more focus on the card than you may want to. Ultimately, it's better to build a Majestic Red Dragon deck, as opposed to a Red Dragon Archfiend deck with this card splashed in as a part of it. Because realistically, Yusei and Jack were the only characters in 5Ds that the writers really cared about when it came to decks, their dragons got way more evolved forms than anybody else, especially as the show escalated in terms of power. First came the Majestic Dragons, which were very cool, but then in order to beat the clearly unstoppable Mech Lords, new strength was required. Yusei learned to ride his bike really fast and got Shooting Star Dragon, whereas Jack did some things in an arc that was never dubbed and attained this beast, Red Nova Dragon. It's the original double tuner Synchro Monster, requiring 2 tuners and Red Dragon Archfiend because Jack Atlas is just built different. It's level 12, has 3500 attack and the following effect. This card gains 500 attack for each tuner monster in your graveyard, cannot be destroyed by an opponent's card effects. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can target the attacking monster, banish this card, and if you do, negate that attack. During the next end phase, special summon this card, banished by this effect. Overall, this is a pretty decent Synchro Monster, though outclassed by other members of the archetype and in general when it comes to the modern game. The protection is always appreciated, and the attack gain ensures that this thing will have at least 5000 attack from the tuners used here and for the RDA you need to summon it. If it hits, it will hit hard. The attack negation is a bit iffy. It targets the monster, then banishes itself, then negates the attack. Why does a Red Dragon Archfiend monster have a defensive effect that would look more appropriate on a Stardust monster? In addition, who's going to be attacking while you've got a 5000 attack dragon on the field? Maybe you actually managed to summon Gate Guardian after 20 years of trying, but your opponent's Beast Machine King Barbaros is about to ruin your fun, so you banish your Red Nova Dragon to save your precious child. Genius! In a more realistic setting, you just banished your biggest monster to save your small monster, but now all of your opponent's other big monsters, because let's face it, it's modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, they'll have more than one, they can then attack over your small monster and then your life points, because Red Nova Dragon on the field was the only thing keeping them at bay. Hopefully that explanation makes somewhat sense. I'll try and edit in some little visual aids. I just think that the effect is underwhelming and out of place on a Red Dragon Archfiend boss monster, especially as it needs to target the attacker. That shit doesn't fly in 2022. Run it if you want, it's certainly not that bad and quite the monster, but it has been thoroughly outclassed. Oh, look at that. It's the outclasser to the outclassee. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. That is a name. It's also a level 12 that requires 2 tuners and a non-tuner Dark Dragon Synchro Monster to summon. It has 4000 attack, 3500 defense, so it's already beefier than Red Nova, and it also has the following effect. When this card is synchro summoned, you can activate this effect. Until the end of this turn, your opponent cannot activate cards, and cards your opponent controls cannot activate their effects. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to this effect's activation. If this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. If this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can target one level 8 or lower Dark Dragon Synchro monster in your graveyard, special summon it. Well, this thing is quite the step up from Red Nova Dragon. While it lacks the attack gain and overall beefy power of the original RND, you can practically see the passage of time by comparing the two. King Calamity's negation effect, especially at spell speed 4, is pretty damn sweet. It guarantees you a big hit this turn, seeing as this thing's attack is still gargantuan. Plus it has a Flame Wingman effect on top of that. The additional floating just makes the card even more well-rounded, so this is certainly a great card for the Archetype, and definitely worth running, seeing as the 2 tuner requirement is easier to pull off now than ever before. It's certainly a more worthy boss monster than the original R&D. Also, check out them thighs. This man certainly earned the title of hot. However, because apparently King Calamity wasn't quite over the top enough, we have one more dragon to look at. Red Supernova Dragon. My god, I love that name. As you can imagine, it's basically Red Nova Dragon, but super. Actually, super might be an understatement. It's a goddamn triple tuner monster. Level 12, 4000 attack, 3000 defense, and one hell of an effect. Gains 500 attack for each tuner in your graveyard. Can't be destroyed by card effects. Once per turn, if your opponent activates an effect or if an opponent's monster declares an attack, quick effect, you can banish this card and all cards your opponent controls. Once per turn, during your next end phase after this card was banished by its own effect, special summon this banished card. Holy shit, what a monster. Guaranteed 5500 attack right off the bat, decent protection, and one of the most awesome nuke effects ever. The cooldown is a bit long admittedly, but it's totally worth it. Even better than that, using Crimson Resonator and Red Rising Dragon together, you can summon this guy on one damn turn, even on turn 1, assuming you don't get negated, like in that combo I showed earlier. Definitely run a copy or two, and try to get this thing out as quickly as possible. It's a boss monster of epic proportions, one of my favourite monsters released in recent years. Hot damn, that was quite the way to end the monster lineup. We move now to the spells and traps. Let's see if we can continue the excellence. Scarlet Security is basically Harpy's Feather Duster, but it requires you to control Red Dragon Archfiend. Now, I would go into the pros and cons and discuss how you probably won't have Red Dragon Archfiend on the field enough in order to warrant running this, but there's a simple reason why Scarlet Security is completely outclassed. Harpy's Feather Duster is legal again. Sorry buddy, you've been Mystical Wind Typhooned. Red Dragon's Vase is the archetypal Pot of Greed, but it sucks. A shame considering the nifty artwork. If you control Red Dragon Archfiend, draw 2 cards. You cannot normal or special summon monsters this turn or until the end of your opponent's next turn. Do you want to chuck any more restrictions on there, big guy? This is far too strict. You probably won't even have that specific Red Dragon Archfiend or Scarlight on the field, seeing as you're using it as a stepping stone to the higher tiers of RDA, which is why you'd want even more cards, but it locks you out of doing that. This card is just dumb. Run any of the other billions of Pot of Greed retrains. I also want to shout out Burning Soul for being a reference to Jack Atlas anime stuff and a pretty cool support card in general. However, it's not direct RDA support, so a glancing mention is all it gets. Well, that was quick. The 2 spells are just retrains of better cards, and they're both outdated. Bit of a disappointment, really. The trap lineup, however, gets a lot more interesting. The first one is Red Cocoon. Target 1 Dragon-type Synchro Monster you control, equip this card to it. While it's battling an opponent's monster, until the end of the damage step, negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent controls. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can target 1 Red Dragon Archfiend in your graveyard, special summon it. This card is one of the more interesting traps in the archetype, but the thing that holds it back is the fact that it's a trap. Why is it a trap? Equip spells exist for a reason, people. The effect is good, don't get me wrong, but was it really worth that slow trade-off? I feel the slot is better saved for field nukes or combo pieces, rather than slow combat extenders. A shame, because that effect is damn useful. Next up is Red Rain. If you control a level 8 or higher Synchro Monster, banish all monsters on the field except the monsters with the highest level. Also, the remaining face-up monsters on the field are unaffected by any other card effects except their own, until the end of the turn. If a Dark Dragon Synchro Monster is Synchro summoned to your field while this card's in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. You can only use this effect of Red Rain once per turn. Well, this certainly fits the power-heavy theme of Red Dragon Archfiend, and truth be told, I have no complaints. A field-wide banish of every monster except the one with the highest level is awesome, and considering the level 12s in RDA, you'll almost certainly be the one with the alpha monster. Even better, you can afford to get this card discarded or destroyed because you can then add it back to your hand when you bring out the big dragon. It can be a bit overkill, especially if used with Supernova Dragon, which basically does the same thing anyway, but there's no harm in having more removal options. Red Supremacy is unfortunately named, especially in this day and age. It's also not amazing. It lets you banish a Red Dragon Archfiend monster from your graveyard and then target one Red Dragon Archfiend monster you control, and it gains the banished monster's name and effects. It's not awful, but a little gimmicky for my taste. It's quite slow, and it's situational, seeing as, for example, if you use it to copy Abyss's effect onto a monster, you'll have to do it preemptively, because you can't chain Supremacy to an effect and then negate the effect with your new Abyss Dragon. The fact that it's pretty easy to bring back your Red Dragon Archfiend monsters and synchro them into new ones makes me not really consider this card worth a slot in the deck. If it could copy Supernova on the other hand, that would be a different story. But it can't, so it isn't. One of the most recent pieces of support is the Great Soul, and it's definitely one of the more interesting pieces of the deck. If a Dragon Synchro monster is on the field, special summon up to 2 Resonator monsters and or level 1 Dragon monsters from your deck. When a monster effect is activated, if you control a level 10 or higher Dark Dragon Synchro monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard, negate that effect, and if you do, one Synchro monster you control gains 2000 attack until the end of the next turn. You can only use each effect of the Great Soul once per turn. Overall, this is a great card. At first, I thought this card was mainly to assist the summoning of Majestic Red Dragon. I mean, summon Converging Will's Dragon and a starter Xiaolong, for lack of better options, along with your RDA, and boom, you've got yourself a fine Majestic monster for the turn. That is a perfectly viable play, but, as it turns out, not optimal. The summoning of the Resonator monsters is where this effect really kicks in because, well, you've just gotten 2 tuners. That's a King Calamity, and with how easy Resonators are to bring out, it's perfectly possible you have another one out already. That's a Supernova Dragon, if you have enough fairy levels. The second effect is also pretty cool. A little overkill perhaps, but more attack points are always fun, especially when they're a side effect on an already good card. My favourite use of this effect is negating the graveyard effect of my own Synchron Resonator, something I first did by accident, to then boost my Supernova Dragon or King Calamity to absolutely ridiculous attack values. But of course, you can also use it as a piece of disruption on your opponent. The only downside of this card is that it's a trap, so I wouldn't recommend maxing out on it because it's a trap and it's slow, but it's definitely worth a copy or 2 in the deck. Well, that was awesome. It's a shame that this next card won't live up to that hype. Red Screen is a continuous trap card with this effect. Your opponent's monsters cannot declare attacks. During each of your end phases, you must pay 1000 life points. This is not optional, or this card is destroyed. You can target one level 1 tuner monster in your graveyard, destroy this card, and if you do, special summon that target. Red Dragon Archfiend must be on the field to activate and to resolve this effect. It's not like it's a terrible effect, but it's just not necessary. You'll have quicker ways to resurrect a level 1 tuner, and this card enforces being on the defensive, something Red Dragon Archfiend tries to avoid. It's more of an expensive messenger of peace with a gimmicky side bit than an actually useful tech piece in the deck. Not a fan. Continuing down Mediocre Street, we have King Scarlet. If a Red Dragon Archfiend monster you control battles, during damage calculation, make that monster you control unable to be destroyed by that battle, and if you do, special summon this card as a normal monster. Fiend type, tuner, fire, level 1, attack, and defense at 0. This card is also still a trap card. I can see the point of this card, but I don't really care.
Oh, those brutal words hurt my skin.
It sets up the summon of Abyss or Tyrant or Bane if you use it with Abyss, but I just don't think it's worth a spot in the deck. It's slow, there's no guarantee your monster will survive long enough to do any tuning if you activate this during your opponent's turn, and you don't really struggle with getting Resonators on the field to warrant a card like this. It's overkill in a way that the deck doesn't need, and therefore I think it's unnecessary. At the end of the list, we have the counter trap Crimson Fire. When your opponent activates a spell or trap card that would inflict damage to you, while you control a Red Dragon Archfiend, your opponent takes twice the effect damage you would have taken instead. Back in the days of 5Ds, there were more burns going around than during the days of YouTube diss tracks, so it's not surprising something like this would come about. Honestly though, I'm not a huge fan. See, if it also worked on monster effects, and it worked if you had a Red Dragon Archfiend monster, then I'd be singing the circumstantial praises. Fuck you, Cowboy for game. I know this highly situational and would never happen realistically, but let me have my hypotheticals, please. As it is now, though, what are you gonna do? Reflect sparks back to your opponent for 400 damage? Ooh, scary. The absolute best case scenario is one-shotting your opponent with a reflected afterglow, or perhaps dealing a hefty amount of damage by reflecting a spell or trap that inflicts damage relative to the original attack of a powerful monster. Those situations don't warrant running this thing, especially seeing as you need the original Red Dragon Archfiend or Scarlight in order to use it. Really though, I don't see why I'm surprised. Trying to fight fire with bigger fire doesn't work. We made it. That took a year and a half, several mental crashes, and over 300 subscribers. Let's make it even worse with a grading. Ugh, can you believe this thing? Look at it, copy pasted from RDA except I changed one word. Half the time I get the grades wrong too. I gave Ice Barriers 3 greens on my first attempt at reviewing them. What was wrong with me? Besides the fact that I was 15 and had only been playing the game properly for about a year. Anyways, let's switch it up a little bit, adding in a couple numerical values and seeing if we can get the grades a little more spot on this time. Consistency is pretty good. With all the new support, you're near guaranteed to bring out at least Red Rising Dragon on your first turn at worst, and at best your opponent now has Red Supernova Dragons staring them down, ready to eat them and their entire life savings. That being said, bricks are possible if you end up with a bunch of tuners in your hand and no way to do anything with them, but Resonator command can compensate for that enough to partially nullify that weakness. The Resonators even have an equal equivalent, what's not to love? Admittedly, negation is not your friend, and one good time negation could potentially doom your opening hand, but that's the same for almost every deck in its consistency, so it's not a huge deal. I give it a 7 out of 10. Power is a 10. What? You want me to explain? Supernova Dragon exists. He's worth a 9 out of 10 on his own. But the amount of alternate field nukes they have, including non-destruction nukes, combined with their sky-high attack values and the potential to go even further beyond, push us to the point where I'd give them an 11 if I could. The recovery is iffy. The ability to recycle is definitely there with things like Resonator Engine, and there are many ways to revive your tuners and even your dragons, though some of those are a little hard to get going. It's very easy to recycle. You're not going to deplete your resources that quickly. You can keep synchro summoning for a long time, but this deck is certainly a front-runner archetype. If it gets on the back foot, momentum is hard to gain back, and one negation can screw over my first turn supernova combo I brag so highly about. I'll give it a 5 out of 10, an average stat. Not too bad, but nothing stand out from an average archetype. Protection is one of the weaker aspects of this archetype, but in true Jack Atlas fashion, even the weaker sides are far from helpless. Several of the boss monsters have immunity to destruction effects. There's a fair share of negation to go around with things like Abyss, Great Soul and Supernova, and there's even attack negation, as mediocre as it may be, except for Supernova. He's great. Overall, the problem with the protection is that it's mainly limited to the boss monsters. However, those are the monsters you want to be protecting, so is it really a downside? I'll give it a 4 out of 10. It's not hopeless, arguably it could go higher, but with how I've sort of graded protection, can't really push it any further than that. Magispectors, this deck is not. Versatility is an area that I thought would be super strong in this deck, but when I look at what the word means through a different lens, it's not exactly stand out. As I said before, this deck is basically one big giant bicep. You punch really, really hard, and if you can't, well, good luck to you, buddy. RDA control anyone? No? Yeah, didn't think so. There's plenty of options in the deck to get to that goal of extreme power, though. With so many different synchros and their varying effects, such as Abyss's negation, Bane's swarming, or Tyrant's field nukes. There is a surprising amount of different plays you can go into, besides the big, huge Supernova Dragon. You can definitely evolve your strategy mid-duel, and find the combos that suit you, especially with all the different Resonators. The unfortunate part of the versatility is the fact that, with the Resonators, sometimes you're locked into Dark Dragon Synchro Monsters. While this isn't a problem when it comes to special summoning Red Dragon Archfiends, that isn't the widest pool of other Synchro Monsters to choose from. Some of their better members, like Void Ogre or Biel's, require Dark Tuners, and the Resonators have enough varied attributes to make that unreliable. Red Resonator, their second best member, arguably top spot, is a Fire Tuner. Borreload Savage Dragon is also cut down by the fact that the deck, or at least the one that I play, hardly ever uses Link monsters. Taking everything I just said into account regarding the pros and cons, the versatility is relatively small, but the options within that small selection are more than enough to fulfill the deck's intended playstyle. It's about quality, not quantity. 7 out of 10. Overall, Red Dragon Archfiend plus Resonators gets a score of 33 out of 50. Now that might not seem too impressive, but you've got to remember the context. The power is absolutely outstanding, enough to make up for the weaker aspects like protection and recovery. And hey, for an anime-based archetype, it could certainly be a hell of a lot worse. Hopefully my commentary throughout the grading will provide more context than just me throwing up a simple number on the screen. Here's a deck that I built the day before finishing the script. I updated it a lot as I tried out different cards and combos, and I'd say it's not exactly a pushover. Like I showed earlier, first turn Supernova Dragon is no joke, and the deck is mainly focused on getting him out. Wandering King Wildwind is a great addition as a non-tuner level 4 that you can summon alongside any of your main Resonators. I also include the option for Majestic Red Dragon in there, hence converging Will's Dragon and Starter Xiaolong, but that's more for my inner anime weeb than anything else. It's a bit of a hindrance in the deck, honestly. If you take him out, you can just focus more on summoning the big boys, like in this alternate build. Red Dragon Archfiend as a monster is underwhelming. Red Dragon Archfiend as an archetype with Resonators is an awesome force. I'm more of a Stardust fan and Shooting Koi's a fanboy at the end of the day, but the power of this deck is intoxicating as I've found out. As a small brain player that doesn't like 15-minute combos, 30 negates on every turn, and linking more times than the entirety of the Vrains anime, RDA is right up my alley, as a fast and fun power-based deck that has enough versatility in its plays as to not require the same basic moves over and over again. While I am upset that out of the 5 Ds, only 2 of them ever really got much love from the creators in terms of their decks, though that is being rectified in recent years, I'm very happy Red Dragon Archfiend got the support that it did. It keeps in theme with the original's ideas and expands on it to make it better than ever and a blast to play. If you like a hyper-aggressive playstyle, big numbers, and dragons, I would heavily recommend this deck. It's been a blast reviewing it. As for new support, I don't really know what else could be added. Perhaps a couple more level 4s to assist in the summoning of Red Rising, but that's already covered by Wildwind and Sprinter. I can't even give the obvious answer of give them a field spell, because, yeah, add more protection to the monsters, but do they really need it? They've already got nuclear bombs in their fists, do they really need an impenetrable fortress around them as well? Ultimately, this archetype is in a really good place. I don't think it needs that more support. Jack Atlas can sit content on top of his throne for a good while longer, with an archetype truly worthy of a king. So, I finally did it. I delivered on the promise I really should have fulfilled a long time ago. Though, if I'd known how much work this video was going to be, I'd feel a bit less guilty that I put it off so long. I'm so sorry that this video took so long to make, Drakeclaw, and I thank you for your patience. I appreciate your support, and for shocking me back into action with your recent comment to finally finish this thing. In truth, I don't know if I'll be doing many more of these archetype analyses, because ultimately, it is just worse ranked 10 Yu-Gi-Oh! It started as that, and ultimately, it still is that to this day. I did enjoy making this video, don't get me wrong, but overall, these reviews might just not be my thing anymore. I want to try and start making more original content, and if I'm trapped in the shadow of Rada, it makes me feel worse, and eventually, I feel people are going to get sick of it. However, never say never. I still have one more archetype analysis with a completed script and ready to record, so you might be seeing the swan song of this series sooner than you'd imagine. As for the future of the series beyond that, who knows? In any case, I'd like to thank you all for watching this far. I really hope you enjoyed. This is the most effort I've put into a video in a long time. I did not intend for it to be this long, but hey, Red Dragon Archfiend is certainly worthy of that time. If you have any suggestions for future videos, drop them in the comment section below. I promise I've got a lot of big videos planned and coming up rather soon, and I can't wait to share them all with you. I will see you all next time. Thank you for sticking with me. See you later.